Welcome. I would like to welcome and to thank all of you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us today in this afternoon's webinar, The Gold and the Garbage in Leadership Training and Development. Today's webinar is actually co-organized between the Human Resource Development Fund and Cyberjaya University. And my name is Rony Ambrose Gobilee. I am the Chief Programs Officer of Human Resource Development Fund, and today I will be your moderator. We are blessed today, this afternoon, that we have a prominent speaker together with us who will be sharing, deliberating, and discussing the topic mentioned earlier. But perhaps before I focus on the main essence of our webinar, allow me a few minutes to just actually highlight some of the housekeeping rules, and I promise to make it short and sweet as possible. Yeah. So the first housekeeping rules for everyone here is that you will be muted. Your microphone will be muted, and during the entire session. And should you have any question, kindly post your question in the Q&A box instead of the chat box. Yeah. And all questions will be addressed at the end of the session. And today's slide, as well as the recorded video, will be made available at the SMR website. Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's go into why we are here today. Um, Again, we are honored to be here today, and joining with us is our well-learned Professor Junbo Borromeo. Prof, allow me to read your profile. I know my text here will be unfair with you because you have very rich profile, but allow me to just read some of them. Ladies and gentlemen, introducing to you Professor Junbo Borromeo, who is currently an adjunct faculty member of AIM and an independent director and vice chair of Stratcom Corporation, a leading Philippine IT solution provider serving the Land Transportation Office. His major areas of specializations are organizational behavior, organization development, management of change, and strategy. He has designed and conducted management development seminars, team building intervention, and strategic planning workshops for a wide variety of companies and organizations throughout the Asian region. Professor Junbo has co-authored with J. Sai in the topic of leadership of a chapter in M.R. Mechanova and Ethel book entitled Understanding the Filipino Worker and Organization. He has also co-authored with S. Santidran and VGR Chandran Govindaraju in an article entitled Enabling Organizational Change Leadership, Commitment to Change and the Mediation Role of Change Readiness, which was published in the Journal of Business Economic and Management. Since retirement, Prof. Junbo has designed and conducted strategic planning workshop for Brand on Demand, which a leader in event management industry. Saichit Salazar Law Office, the country's leading law firm in Philippines. Vonotech, a leading high-rise building maintenance contractor, and Stratcom Corporation Operation Group. Professor Junbo has also been honored for developing new standard in graduate education in the Asia HRD Award here in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, allow me to hand over the session to our professor who will be sharing his view in the topic of the gold, the garbage in leadership training and development. Handing over to you, Prof.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Rony. And Mr. Vinesh, I'm going to share my screen now, if I may.
Sure, Prof.
Okay. All right. I think we see it clearly.
Yes.
Okay. So my topic today is the gold and the garbage in leadership training and development. I got the idea for this title actually from a gentleman I met in Kuala Lumpur back in, I think it was 1978 or 79, a long time ago, before, I suspect, before many of you were born. But this gentleman, his name was James Lee. He was an American. He was an operations researcher, and he was teaching at the University of Malaya. And he was sharing with me over dinner a book that he had published. And the title of the book was The Gold and the Garbage in Management Theory and Practice. And basically, in that book, he debunked many of the contemporary management theories. But that's just an aside. Let me, first of all, before I proceed, greet all of you. Salamat ng hari. And I want to say terima kasih to all of you for joining this webinar. I also want to thank Tansri Dr. Palan and Dr. Subra of SMR HR Group. Of course, Mr. Rony Ambrose Gobilee and HRDF Malaysia. And University Cyberjaya, in particular, Dr. Haji Zulkifli Baharom, uh, whom I who actually did the actual invitation for me, and whom I could not refuse. And Mr. Vinesh, who is ably assisting with the technology of this webinar. I want to also apologize for the clickbait title of this webinar. A clickbait is a sensationalized headline. It basically tempts you to click on a link to an article, to an image, a video, or even a webinar. And often it's an appeal to your emotions and curiosity. So I deliberately use this title to attract you to the webinar. All right, but actually, it's like when a seminar leader or facilitator starts the seminar to get your attention by doing something like this. All right. Uh, and then, of course, everyone gets taken by surprise. And then at that point, the seminar leader has got everyone's undivided attention. Okay. So a better title for this webinar would be What I Have Observed About Leadership Training and Development in the Last 4 decades. Yes, I have been involved with management education and management training for a little, well, actually, in actual fact, 44 years already. And I'd like to share my observations with you this afternoon. Full disclosure, I'm not presenting an academic paper. I am sharing my personal and certainly they're going to be biased observations and insights after more than 4 decades of executive education and private consulting. In this particular domain, one of the popular and never-ending debate always has to do with the question of, are leaders born or are they made? Now, of course, many leaders are born. Uh, in my own country, okay, we have many politicians who are sons and daughters of politician parents, or they are in fact grandchildren of politicians, and some even are great grandchildren of politicians. So you could say they were practically born into the position. Of course, there are children of entrepreneurs who, from childhood, are groomed to take over the family business. And then again, we know that in some unfortunate countries, there are children of dictators. All right. So, what has all of this resulted in is that there are many who believe and actually hope that leadership need not be something that you are born into, but leadership can be taught or it can be learned. And because of this belief that leadership can be taught or learned, a whole industry has grown around training and development. You have here in this graphic, of course, you're familiar with TEDx, TED Talks. McKinsey, a very famous consulting firm, has gone into leadership training for some time now with their Leadership Accelerator. Of course, you have business schools like Harvard. Uh, Harvard has talks about their comprehensive leadership programs in executive education. So this whole ecosystem of leadership training and development includes B schools. They include journalists like Malcolm Gladwell, for example, okay, or Jonah Lehrer, who've taken the academic articles of researchers and scientists and put them in readable form. They've popularized them. You have TED Talks, you have inspirational speakers, webinars such as what we're having just now, seminars, you have consulting companies, MOOCs, of course, and then, of course, you have the academic journals, corporate universities, among others. And as with any industry, you will have disruptors. Disruptors like, would you believe, the Badass Leader Academy. So we have all kinds of entities, institutions, individuals getting into the leadership training and development business. Now, in fact, the business has grown into the multi-billion dollar level. Now, why is that? Okay. By the way, if you look at another part of this ecosystem, very popular are the books. Here's something interesting. You might try this yourself. Go into the Amazon.com website, look at the book section, and then do a search for leader or leadership. And you will be amazed at the number of hits that you're going to get. You will get over 60,000, meaning that on Amazon.com, there are available more than 60,000 books on the topic of leader and leadership. All right. So, why has this grown so much, this industry, this business? Simply because of the belief that leadership is correlated with business results. Now, let's go and take a look at how this all came about. It has to do with the side by side, if you will, side by side evolution of management and capitalism 101, or what we call shareholder value. Back in 1909, Henri Fayol wrote a book wherein he defined the functions of management. And he identified the following: planning, organizing, commanding, coordinating, and controlling. Now, management scholars uh, decided to work with this, but they boiled it down. They boiled down the functions to planning, leading, organizing, and controlling. And others, especially during or around the time of the Human Relations School, would also change leading to leading and motivating. All right. Then in 1970, Milton Friedman, an economist, wrote an article in the New York Times, and the article was entitled "The Social Responsibility of Business is to Increase Its Profits." He said that basically a company has no social responsibility to the public or to society. Its only responsibility is to its shareholders. And this gave birth to what we call shareholder value, the concept of shareholder value. Of course, to most businessmen, this was all the justification they needed to pursue profit relentlessly. Now, if you put those two ideas together, the idea of managers leading and the idea of businesses making money for its shareholders, then you will conclude that the job of management is to plan, to lead, to organize and control in order to increase the company's profits. All right. Now, management's minds are now conditioned by this particular philosophy. And research, and I'm just citing one particular uh, publication here by McKinsey. By the way, I like McKinsey because they work hand in hand with industry. So when they talk about industry, they know what they're talking about. Anyway, this is what they said a few years ago about what CEOs believe about training and development. Okay, the research shows that good leadership is a critical part of organizational health. Number one. Number two, organizational health is an important driver of shareholder returns. Therefore, CEOs now conclude if good leadership is critical to organizational health, and organizational health is an important driver of our profits, therefore, we need to invest in leadership development. All right. Now, this particular philosophy, okay, translates into messages, if you will, that leadership training and development programs unwittingly cascade through the organization. Number one, this is one idea, this is one message that I have observed being communicated as a result of the foregoing philosophy about leadership and business results. Number one, leadership training and development should result to increased productivity, increased efficiency, profitability, and so on. Okay. Number two, leadership training is a prerequisite to promotion. I've observed that when companies look when companies identify people for promotion, the first thing they want to do is to put them through leadership training. The assumption seems to be that, and this is probably a fair assumption, okay, that one of the more important things that they do in the higher position is to exercise leadership. All right. But something else I've observed is that they only talk about high potentials, obviously qualifying for promotion. Okay. And and of course, uh, one does not get the leadership training unless they are being groomed for promotion. So it's always left me wondering what happens to all the others who are not considered high potentials. Does it mean that that the idea of them ever becoming leaders is set aside, is not considered at all? Another observation that I've made is that training budgets are prioritized for high potentials. They're the ones that get the big chunk of the training budgets. For the others, the usual kind of training, technical training, training in supervision, training in the bureaucratic processes and so on, that gets very low priority, and generally very little money is less money is spent on that. Another another thing that I've observed, okay, another message that seems to be unwittingly sent throughout the organization is that leadership goes hand in hand with position in the hierarchy. Uh, in other words, uh, with position comes authority, with authority comes the the title of leader. Okay, and you will notice also that, and I've observed this, I've noticed this, that it seems to come with possession of power. Authority means power, and this usually results in the power to grant or withhold rewards, recognition, promotion, salary increase, and so on. In other words, now leadership becomes very transactional. All right. So those are some of my uh, observations. Now, as a result of all of that, okay, training and development programs, indeed, trainers and HR people fall under tremendous pressure to produce business results. Because if the purpose of leadership is to motivate employees for performance, then HR activities and budgets are only justified if the training results in greater shareholder value, greater productivity, efficiency, and so on. All right. So that now, as a result of these foregoing, let's call them mindsets or philosophies or beliefs or assumptions, as a result of all that, okay, how are these programs and their participants evaluated? Three things I've observed. Okay. The first has to do with what the participants take away from the training. And there are three things here. I've observed that at the end of a training program, participants are often asked, okay, what have you learned? Okay. And invariably, because they have to say that they did learn something, okay, they'll talk about having learned new concepts. They talk about learning how to do this and how to do that. Uh, all right. But I'll have something to say about that in a short while. Okay. So they talk about what new things they've grown to appreciate over the last so many days of the seminar or workshop. Okay. Another takeaway has to do with inspiration. Okay. They are expected to be inspired to become better leaders. I have something to say which many of you may not like. It has to do with the use of motivational speakers. Okay. Motivational speakers are good at what they do. Unfortunately, they're not there when the people need them the most, and that is on the job. When somebody undergoes leadership training and listens to a motivational speaker and then feels inspired to be a better leader himself or herself, okay, it doesn't necessarily follow that A, they've actually learned or they will actually be able to perform the new skill, leadership skill that's expected of them, or that they'll have a chance to apply that particular skill. All right. It's no assurance even. Okay. So they feel good, which is the other thing about the participants takeaway. I've I've observed, I've seen so many of these. I think we call them smile sheets. Okay, where participants are asked if how they felt about the program. Did you like the facilitator? Did he have good jokes? Did he keep you entertained? Okay, did he keep you awake? What did you like about the venue? Was it okay? Was it too cold or just right? The food, was it to your taste? Was it appetizing? And so on and so forth. All right. Now, those are the typical things that I see being asked and being the factors being used to evaluate whether a program is good or not good. Another another uh, another thing that I've observed is that the organizers of training programs, the sponsors of training programs, uh, they often expect feedback or even grading from the facilitators or from the seminar leaders. Uh, I've never enjoyed doing this, okay? Because what if you're running a 1 day program or even a half day, or if you're running just one session as part of a larger program, uh, how much can you really learn about your participants such that you can say, uh, he's absolutely learned something new, or you can say, oh, he's got potential to be a great leader, or he has shown great people skills. uh, the most you can say probably is that he's very active during the session. He participates, he shows great interest. But that's pretty much about it. Of course, in a longer program, which is more intensive, where there are many practical exercises, yeah, of course, you can give better feedback. But usually, that is not available to you. Third thing that most sponsors of training programs look for is the impact on the performance of the participants' departments. Okay, if let's say they're a department head, then it is expected that their department's profitability, efficiency, sales, productivity, and so on will improve. Because again, the idea is that good leadership leads to better performance, better business performance. Okay, well, despite all of the investments in leadership training and development, CEOs are not really convinced, okay? Despite more than $50 billion spent annually, and this is back in 2017, okay, spent on leadership training, only 7% of CEOs believe their companies are building effective global leaders. And only 11% strongly agreed that their leadership development interventions achieve and sustain desired results. In other words, even the CEOs who talk about the importance of leadership training and development and who say that they will continue to invest in it are not really sold on leadership training and development. All right. Now, to me, what's more important is that is the real failure of leadership training and development. Okay. Pfeffer wrote in 2015, leadership failures continue to occur with unacceptable frequency in spite of all the leadership development efforts, training programs, books, TED Talks, etc. Okay. There sits ample, even overwhelming evidence of workplaces filled with disengaged, dissatisfied employees who do not trust their leaders and whose oft expressed number one desire is to leave their current employer. Those of you who are familiar with employee engagement surveys, okay, and I've been for several years now, I've been a judge in the Philippines Best Employers Annual Awards, okay, and this award uses engagement surveys very extensively, and you know most the winners, of course, they tend to score very high on all the engagement factors, but the rest, and we're looking at as much as 70-75% of companies, okay, the engagement levels barely get over 35-40%, and that is quite low. That is quite low. So what I'm saying here is that all of this training and development has not fixed mistakes that corporate leaders, senior managers, and so on make. And more importantly, all of this training has not raised engagement levels, employee engagement levels. If, if the whole point of leadership is to motivate, then we better be looking at the effect on motivation, isn't it? All right. So what's wrong? What's wrong, as I've been leading up to, is that training programs measure business results instead of people results. Okay. Training and development. Okay. Training and development means behavior change. Therefore, trainers should measure behavior change on the job. In other words, what leadership skills did the participants acquire from and apply after the program that he or she was not using previously? Secondly, the purpose of leadership is to motivate. Therefore, trainers should also measure and compare employee engagement levels before and after these high posts, these high potentials, return from their leadership training. Okay. So, how do we address all of this? It seems to me that a leadership development program should start with the only definition of leader, right? Um, you 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 cannot measure something unless you're very clear on what it is you're measuring. So if you're looking at leadership development, you have to be very clear what exactly are you developing so you can measure it, so that you can say development did happen or development did take place. Okay. Now, according to Drucker, the only definition of leader is one who has followers. And some years later, Kellerman, in writing about Drucker, uh, paraphrases it this way: there is no leader without at least one follower. Now, I like to think I learned, not just heard, I learned a very interesting adaptation of this definition from David Corey. David Corey, as some of you may know, is a consultant associated with the SMR HR group. And back in 2016, I was attending a seminar in Kuala Lumpur conducted by David Corey. And in one of the sessions, David said that leadership is the choice to be part of the solution. Because if you choose otherwise, you choose to be part of the problem. Wow, uh, I've I've been through. This is not a plug for David Corey or for SMR group, by the way, but I've been to many seminars myself as a participant, and rarely have I been made to stop and really think. Okay, and this changed many of my thoughts about leadership, because at the time I was a full-time faculty member teaching MBA and EMBA programs. And as I thought about David's idea of what leadership means, I got to thinking that a leader, therefore, following from David Corey, a leader is anyone who chooses to be part of the solution. Now, in my MBA and EMBA courses, I always require a project, which I call the walkabout. And here, I basically tell the students, you're on your own. You figure out what you want to do, as long as at the end of the day, whatever it is you did, whatever project you undertook, allows me to see you now as a leader, and that you have acquired certain leadership skills that you did not have before. Well, what I observed as I as I heard the students now reporting on their walkabout projects, and now having David Corey's definition of leadership in the back of my head, what I observed is this: that my students, when they chose to work on a problem, that was not being addressed well enough, okay, they tended to attract people who saw the same problem, but were waiting for somebody to initiate a solution. And what would happen invariably is that these people now would tell my student, we like what you're doing and we want to help you. So, what happened here now? Those who said, we want to help you, in effect became followers. And going by Drucker's definition, since now my student has generated or has attracted followers, my student has now become a leader. So in 2018, I was addressing a multinational company which had in fact won this best employer award. And I was telling them, I told them that whenever one chooses to work on a problem that resonates with others, invariably he or she will attract volunteers who happily and willingly offer to help. And those happy volunteers, perforce, become followers. All right. So, what to do, lah? What to do is grow leaders by teaching them to grow followers. How do we go about this? Let's backtrack a little bit. And you remember clickbait? Well, some of the more than 60,000 titles on Amazon.com have these titles: Leaders Eat Last, Developing the Leader Within You 2.0, 360. You'll notice, okay, how these titles, number one, they catch your attention. You know, you ask, why should leaders eat last? Okay, I'm the boss, I should eat first. Okay, the emotionally healthy leader, okay, suggesting that there is such a thing as an emotionally unhealthy leader. Okay, good leaders ask great questions. How to be an inclusive leader. By the way, developing the leader within you 2.0, why is that clickbait? Because it tells you that you might have missed out on 1.0. The 7 perspectives, supervisor to super, from ordinary leader. The leader can be ordinary, but here are 10 key insights and so on and so forth. Okay, what's my point here? My point here is that leaders and leadership are described in so many different ways. In fact, if you look at all of them, they can be very confusing. So, what's happened is that some authors have decided, why don't we take a look at all of these leader and leadership definitions and leadership styles, and let's try and classify them. All right. So somebody's come up with 10 common leadership styles: the coach, the visionary, the servant leader, the autocratic leader, and so on and so forth. Okay. Of course, it begs the question, why 10? Why not 12? Why not 6? Why not 200? All right. Well, the question to ask is, are there really more than two kinds of leadership or two kinds of leader? Okay. If you look at all of these 60,000 titles, and I admit I did not look at all of them, okay, I tried to take a random sample, okay, I found anyway that they can all be classified under either transactional leadership or transformational uh, leadership, okay. The smartest person in the room, the root cause and the new solution for cybersecurity, uh, 8 pillars that drive results, guidelines for the leader and the commander, recognizing the impact of your leadership brand. Boy, that really suggests a kind of directive approach to leadership. On the other hand, you look at titles such as Secrets to Building People, okay? Uh, how to reframe bias, cultivate connection, create high-performing teams, the 5 disciplines of inclusive leaders, the path to personal mastery, leadership, and peak performance, the Servant Leaders Manifesto, how to create a workplace where people like to work. That's clearly transformational leadership. So, transformational and transactional leadership seems to me, anyway, to be broadly just the two kinds of leadership. Transactional is primarily based on processes and control and requires a strict management structure. It's clearly task oriented leadership. Transformational, on the other hand, focuses on inspiring others to follow, and it requires a high degree of coordination, communication, and cooperation. In other words, it is people orientated. Okay. Uh, I might ask, by the way, if we were an open forum just now, I might ask your organization, is it transactional? Is the dominant style transactional or transformational? If you're in the military, what kind of leadership tends to be the more common? Transactional or transformational? If you're working in a school or a university, what is the leadership like? Is it transactional or transformational? If you belong to a religious order, what's the leadership like? Transactional or transformational? All right. Now, let me suggest a number of steps for developing this kind of leader. Let's look at blending transactional and transformational leadership. Step one seems to me is to learn what motivates and engages people at work. Back in 95, Desi and Ryan came up with a very interesting model called the self-determination theory. And Dan Pink famously made a TED talk out of this, based on this. And, and of course, it's Dan Pink has become a famous author. Uh, what does self-determination theory say? Okay, basically that at work, people are looking for competence, autonomy, and purpose. People want to be able to do the job as competently as possible. So they're looking to acquire the skills that it takes to do their job. They're looking for autonomy. They don't want to be told what to do all the time. They want to be able to figure things out for themselves. They want to be able to make decisions about their job. And thirdly, they're looking for purpose, meaning. They're looking for meaning in their work. Okay. It's not enough to be paid for it. They're looking for some higher order purpose or meaning in the work that they are doing. Uh, there are some studies that tend to show that this is what millennials or the younger generations are looking for. All right. So that's step one. Learn what motivates, engages people at work, and I submit that self-determination theory is probably one of the best models to consider these days. Okay, now why self-determination theory? Okay, because these three things, competence, autonomy, and purpose, contribute to emotional engagement, which is nothing but what? It's a measure of the energy and the passion that employees have for their organization. It's the extent to which an organization has captured the hearts and minds of their employees. And engaged employees, they stay, they have an intense desire to be with the organization, to be part of it. They talk about their work and their workplace, and they strive. They go beyond what is minimally required to produce extraordinary service. Step two, blending transactional and transformational leadership. McKinsey's in their research cites 4 behaviors that account for 80%, 89% of leader effectiveness. Task-oriented behavior, which is transactional, and people-oriented behavior, which is transformational. solving problems effectively and operating with a strong results orientation. Those are the two behaviors that, that are task orientated. Seeking different perspectives and supporting others, those are the transformational or people orientated behaviors. How do we blend all this? I recommend an old model of leadership called situational leadership. Why? Because situational leadership talks about blending the task orientated and people orientated behavior. It talks about an appropriate style that depends on the development level of the subordinates, which is defined by their ability to perform a task with competence and commitment. And this model allows the leader to adapt their style, therefore, to self determination theory, competence, commitment, and finally, autonomy. Leaders must not be afraid to give autonomy when appropriate to the development level of their subordinates. So, the essential skills training for transactional, transformational leaders: critical thinking, that's a task orientation; empowering and emotional intelligence, which is the people orientation; and then managing change. Because when one exercises leadership skills, the purpose is to motivate. And that means motivate towards action. And that means action that is different from what was done before. Because if you're not going to change anything, then you're not going to achieve anything. All right. So, what else can trainers do? Focus on behaviors that really matter based on context. Uh, Designed for the transfer of learning. And today, uh, with with the with the pandemic, okay, people now, trainers have to look at technology, okay, as a key platform for training and development. They have to ensure sufficient reach across the organization, use system reinforcement to lock in change. Okay, meaning that you have to take a very close look at the culture of the organization. Finally, some parting observations. Not everyone wants to be a leader, nor should everyone be a leader. Number two, leadership training and development should cast a wider net. Sometimes the criteria to identify high posts are too restrictive and constrained by the immediate superior's biases. Participants should be diversified, junior and senior, together, cross-functional. What goes around comes around. In leadership training and development, there's a lot of old wine in new skins. Beware the flavor of the month models and beware of clickbait. And finally, read Pfeffer, who talks about changing mental models as HR's most important task. And that concludes my presentation. Sorry I took so long. Terima kasih banyak to everybody.
Thank you so much, Prof. I think it's very insightful and informative. We have quite a number of questions
I'm sure we do.
being posted here, so I will reserve some of my points that I've collected from your sharing just now, and straight away go to the essence of the question. Yeah. So the first question that we have here is on getting your insights pertaining to how much freedom do CEOs of GLCs as leaders and vice versa, the national political authority. So this is more on like seeking your insight, Prof.
GLCs, you mean government-linked
Company.
corporations,
Correct.
government-linked companies? Uh, I well, of course, if he or she is a political appointee, okay, then there's a transactional relationship that invariably takes place, that invariably is there. And very often, and I see this, I'm talking about my own country now, okay, I see this happening. Still, I see, and myself being vice chair of a corporation here that deals with government primarily, okay, and and dealing in particular with a particular government department. All right, I know that the minister of that department uh, does not always kowtow to, you know, what what the president who appointed him says. Okay, he actually looks at what is best for his ministry, for his department. Okay, and I guess what I'm saying is it's really up to the individual. Okay, it's really up to the individual. Okay.
Sure.
Well,
Thank you, Prof. Just to acknowledge, the question is actually from Mr. Khairuddin Hussein. And there's another interesting question by Ms. Payani Fadzil. The question is, why is it so difficult for leaders to demonstrate behavior such as integrity and accountability at workplace? As we have witnessed the collapse of many Fortune 500 companies due to lack of this trait. How should we instill this behavior?
okay. I think you have to. I'm not siding with CEOs and professional managers. All right. What I'm saying is that they are there. Because their shareholders put them there. Their board of directors put them there. Okay. And if the shareholders are only looking at return on investment, okay, in other words, capitalism 1.0, okay, uh, then then the professional management is pretty much their hands are tied. Okay, uh, and then don't forget. Okay, there's the human factor here. Professional managers are also rewarded according to how much profit they make for the shareholders. Okay, and where they are rewarded in terms of stocks, for example. Okay, then they will do whatever they can to build up the value of those stocks. Okay. So, uh, you know, you look at who's really pulling the strings. You know, so it's the investors, and in the more developed countries, those investors they can be hedge funds, uh, they can be banks, they can be people like Warren Buffett. Okay, and they're the ones who ultimately decide what a CEO is going to do. Okay, if the CEO wants to keep his job. Okay, and which is why all this talk about capitalism 2.0, which is leaning more towards social responsibility, leaning more towards stakeholder value rather than just shareholder value. Okay, well, it's going to it's going to be difficult because it will take the shareholders to change that mentality. It will take the shareholders to say, all right, we will now focus on stakeholders. Okay.
So I guess at the end of the day, Prof, is all depends on the objective and the purpose of the organization that the CEO is attached to, right?
Right. And if the owners say, this is our purpose, okay, I hired you to make me rich. Okay. So what are you gonna do?
Sure, sure. Prof, we're going to move to another question. It's also an equally interesting question by Mr. Faiz Rosli. First of all, he said it's a wonderful sharing, Prof. In my biased opinion, I have observed that authoritarian or domineering leadership style is more successful in executing strategies than the others. Your comment, please.
Uh, of course, if you want to get things done quickly, tell everybody shut up and just do this. you know, because it, take a democracy for example. Some democracies, like my own country, uh, things move so slowly because everybody's a lawyer. Everybody wants to talk. Everybody wants to say something. Many years ago, I was fortunate to have dinner with B.G. Lee. At the time, he was not Prime Minister of Singapore. He was what I think he was Finance or Defense Minister at the time. And I asked him. Is it true that here in Singapore nobody can question you guys in government? And he said, "Oh, that's not true." He says, "Before a decision is made, everybody talks. We listen to everybody. But once collectively we arrive at a decision, everybody better shut up. So you want to look at efficiency, okay, versus effectiveness. Over the long run, what are you trying to accomplish? Over the short run, what are you trying to accomplish? Okay. In a military organization, in a combat situation, okay, you cannot, the commander cannot say, all right, we're terribly outnumbered, we are outgunned, but we have to charge up that up that hill. So boys, follow me, charge. And they all say, Captain, maybe we should talk things over first. Well, then they all get killed. Okay. So there are situations, and this is why I am an advocate of situational leadership. You see, uh, why does a commander in the field have to order his men into battle uh, rather than uh, rather than having a discussion and listening to their opinions? Because the task of fighting and possibly dying, they're incompetent in dying. It's a task that they have no experience with. Okay, so they cannot discuss the merits of this or that. In order to get the job done, you just have to order them to do it. Okay.
Sure. Prof, I think there's so many questions actually coming in. Yeah,
Mhm.
but the interest of time, I think we only have two more questions that we would be
Uh-huh.
able to address. And the next question is actually is already in your text, but I just read it out. Is it possible to have both transactional and transformational leadership in an organization or as an individual?
Yes, I believe so. Again, if you have the opportunity, I know it's a very old model, okay, but you can Google it on the internet. There's a lot of material on situational leadership, on Blanchard, who continued the model, okay, and if you look at it very closely, you find it makes eminent sense. To me, it does anyway. Okay, there are all kinds of leadership models these days, but to me, that's just old wine in new skins. What goes around comes around. Uh, after after 40 years of teaching, people ask me, "What have you learned about management?" I tell them, "I've learned that the fundamentals are still true today." Okay, people ask, "What's management?" Management is basically looking at the situation and asking yourself, "Where are we? How did we get here? Where do we want to go? How do we get there?" Simple. And you've got that's strategy formulation, that's problem solving, that's decision making, that's all, just summed up in four fundamental questions. Okay. Now somebody had a question, what's the main skill needed to develop good leadership? I think you want to be open, you want to listen to people. I think the problem I've observed with leaders and those who are being groomed to be leaders is that they get this wrong impression that the leader is supposed to know everything. Okay. And therefore they're afraid to ask, they're afraid to show that they need to depend on others. Okay. But that's the way to gain people's support and trust, by listening to them. Okay. And being open.
Thank you, Prof. I think the last question that we will be looking into is a question that is actually challenging the theory part of leadership development. The question is, how effective is the 70-20-10 rules in leadership development? Is it another myth coined by consulting companies to promote their existence?
Okay. Like I said, you go to Amazon.com, you put in the search for leader or leadership, you'll get 60,000 hits. You know, uh, everyone is trying to create a leadership model or a leadership brand. It's business. Come on, okay. Uh, and and so they want to put a label to it as if this is very different or very new. But sometimes, maybe I'm old school. Okay, but I believe in the fundamentals. I believe in the basics. Okay, uh, I see so many things that when I read about it, when I study it more closely, I find, hey, this is the old something that 30 years ago so and so was talking about. Okay, um, here's the problem. There are many consultants, and I've encountered them. I've worked with them. Okay, and they like to think that they have something different. They have something new. I suppose maybe they feel that it's to justify what they're doing. It's to justify what they're billing their clients. All right. I came across one of my corporate clients was wanted me to design a program to teach their managers and executives this new model that they learned about when in one of their trips to the US. And the new model talked about 136 skills. And they said, okay, can you design a 2-week program which will teach all of those 136 skills to our people, to our high posts? And I said, forget it. Find somebody else to do it. Why don't you talk to this Matt Saleh who told you about this model? I said, oh, he's too expensive. I said, well, I mean, that's why he's expensive, because he's talking about 136 skills. Okay, me, I only talk about two or three. No, actually four. You know, uh, but at the end of the day, all right, you want to be a good leader. Okay, you've read this, you've read that. Just do it. Just use it. Okay. I think the problem is people find reasons not to apply what they read, not to apply what they hear. And that reason is, well, I've tried that before. Or, well, my style works. Or, well, I'm okay with the results we're getting. You know, well, like I say, up to you, lah.
Sure. Prof, it looks like we have more interesting discussion, so I think we're going to extend more question coming in.
Uh-huh.
Uh, the next question is actually from Miss Azita Ilia, which Prof already answered the essence of the question that she asked, but I will expand this question later on. So her question is, can we be both transactional and transformation type of a leader? That is the question, depending on situation or individuals, perhaps. So that is the questions. But I think you have answered this earlier.
Yeah,
But I would like to expand this question by adding another essence of the question,
sure.
by how do we measure, how do we determine whether that person has successfully implemented the situational leadership approach or not?
Yeah. Well, okay. One is you've got to find time to process what they're doing. This is where the mentoring process comes in. Find time with them, talk about it. Okay. I like the concept of teachable moments. Okay, where somebody meets with a mentor, or in fact anybody they can talk with, and say, well, I had a little experience at work yesterday, and I was trying to convince my one of my team members about this or that. Okay, let's talk about it. Okay, what can you learn from it? Okay, what do you think you were doing correctly? Why do you think he was not responding to you? Okay, so this kind of talking about uh, a real life situation, okay, which is not unlike the case method of learning. Okay, this is what allows people to gain insights, about what they're doing, whether their actions are effective or not effective, and why or why not. Okay, so what's important is that people have time to discuss what they're doing, if in fact they're trying to apply some leadership theory. Okay, and that they have reasonable people to talk with. Okay, doesn't have to be a superior. Okay, in fact, I often advise people, why don't you talk with the person, with your team member? Okay, if you say he did not respond to you, okay, why don't you talk with him? Have a have a chat. Okay. But again, the openness, the willingness to listen comes in. To listen without judgment. That's the other problem that a lot of leaders have. They're immediately judging. You know, oh, he's going complaining again. Oh, he just wants more money. Oh, he's just lazy. You know, yeah, we have to remove that, which is why all of these mental models, okay, that's the job of HR to change the organization's mental models.
Sure.
And that's very difficult. Yeah.
Indeed, Prof. It's very challenging. The next question by Aram Safdar is actually he's looking into the four skill areas that you mentioned earlier, Prof. The critical
Yeah.
thinking, emotional intelligence, empowerment, as well as managing change. So the question is, what is the main skill that need to be developed first in order to become a good leader?
Okay. Communication. Communication. Okay. Communication requires, when I teach a leadership course, I'm not talking seminar, of course, I get into communication. All right. Because communication is not just what we understand, sharing of ideas and so on and so forth. It has to do with knowing what's going on in your head and how your mind is working. For example, what are your assumptions? Okay, because you bring those assumptions to the table when you are communicating, when you are interacting with somebody else. Then you have to understand what's going on in their heads. What are their assumptions? Okay, why do they believe the things that they believe in? You look at what's going on in the United States. Those Republicans and Democrats, they will never see eye to eye because nobody wants to accept, won't even listen to what the other is saying. You know, I have a favorite expression: look for the biography, not the ideology. When you are interacting with somebody and that interaction is not going very smoothly, okay? In other words, if you look at the biography, meaning, what is this person's background? What does she like? What does she not like? What 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 are their experiences? Growing up, you will easily find common ground there because obviously in your ideology you are already in disagreement. Okay, but if you're going to start somewhere, you have to find common ground. So where do you find common ground? Find it in the biography, your life's experiences. you know Even those racists in the United States, when a African American tries to talk to a racist openly and looking for common ground, they find common ground in how they grew up, you know, and then they're able to start talking. But going back to the question, communication is fundamental to good leadership. And communication, as I said, it's not just what you say, it's how you say it, it's where it's coming from in your head and where it's going into the other person's head. Okay. So there's a lot of psychology that needs to be understood.
Yeah. So there's a question pertaining to the decision making aspect of leadership raised by Mr. Thomas. The question is: do leader need to think all his decision making? Which one is the best choice?
Uh, well, again, it depends. Okay. Depends how quickly you need to make a decision, who has the authority to make the decision. There are many variables, obviously. Okay. If you have the time, get other people's opinion. Okay. For one, when you when you sincerely seek other people's opinion, you make them feel safe. All right. People hesitate to speak out. People hesitate to contribute in, let's say, a group decision making, um, because they don't feel psychologically safe. They feel they will be judged. They feel they will be criticized. They feel they will be laughed at. Okay. And so what do? They keep quiet. But when your people keep quiet, you lose much of what they potentially can bring to your organization.
Uh, the next one, Prof, is talking about um, getting your opinion on the core factors a trainer should take into account when doing an impact evaluation.
I don't follow the question.
Yeah, I think this question is more on looking at from the trainer's
All
perspective.
right.
Yeah, what are the core factors that the trainer need to put into account when they are doing impact evaluation?
Huh. You know, impact evaluation, to me, this is my opinion, requires that the evaluator actually observe, actually observe the trainee at work. Okay. Uh, do not rely on just verbal feedback. Okay. Uh, it helps if you can get feedback from the team members, from the followers, from the subordinates. Okay. But very often they'll be afraid to give you real feedback. Okay. So you have to find a way to observe it directly. Okay.
Sure.
Not easy. Okay. You don't want to appear to be a spy or something like that. Yeah.
Sure, and there's no direct answer to that kind of situation, Prof. Yeah. So, Prof, I think we have utilized our extended time, and
Oh,
we have, of course, there are so many interests on this topic, and the questions are there. Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, perhaps that is the only time that we have for this evening. And
well, if I may, Mr. Ronnie,
sure,
I don't mind. I'm retired. I have a lot of free time aside from playing golf. So if and the occasional work that I do, you can share my email address. Okay, my AIM address. All right. And if you have questions, please feel free to write to me, and I'll gladly entertain and respond to your questions. Yeah, that's H Borromeo at aim.edu. H Borromeo at aim.edu.
thank you, Prof. Thank you for sharing with us your email address. So I think our enthusiastic ladies and gentlemen would be emailing to you soon. There are quite a number of questions that are specifically addressed to the topic today.
Uh,
Prof, I think the topic of leadership is not something that is a straightforward topic that we can address and solve immediately, like what you rightfully put it. A lot of thinking and thought need to be put into it. Leadership, yes, it's not born, it is something that is learned and practiced. And whether it is transactional leadership or transformational leadership, it is depending on the situation that one is facing. And ideally, it need to be combined so that the approach of situational leadership can be applied. Yeah, in the event of organizational nature of of course, business results is not, it should not be the entire aspect that a leader should be looking into. They should also be looking at people aspect of the equation. Yeah, so that is the essence of today's presentation, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, with the rich knowledge of Professor Junbo today, I think this 1.5 hour is not being fair to him. He has so much thing to share, and there's so much knowledge that he can depart with us. So please feel free to communicate with Professor Junbo in the email that he has given to us earlier. And with that, on behalf of the organizing team, as well as the organizing organization, the Human Resource Development Fund, and the Cyberjaya universities, we would like to thank Prof. Junbo for being here today with us and for generously sharing his knowledge and his experience in the topic given today. Thank you so much, Prof. And I think that's about it, ladies and gentlemen. This is the end of our session. Thank you so much for all your questions, and hopefully we have learned a lot of things and many more to come in the topic of leadership. Thank you so much, Prof.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Rony.